I can't believe that this time last year I was just starting this channel. One of my first uploads was my favourite books of 2025 so far, and it is just crazy to me that it's time to do my favourite books of 2026 so far. I have a nice pile here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 physical books and one book on my Kindle to show you and discuss with you. I, so far this year, have read, I think, 74 books. So I've definitely read a lot more than the same time last year, which is maybe why this pile's a little bit bigger than it was last year. But I was just scrolling through all of the books that I've read this year, and it's been a crazy journey, and we're not even done the year yet. So without further ado, let's get into it. This is in no particular order, and it's not in the order that I've read them, it's just my favourite books that I've read so far this year. Not all of them have come out this year either. Some of them are old, some of them did come out this year. It's just my favourite books that stuck with me, books I really enjoyed, or that were really good. So I'm going to start with the one on my Kindle, and that is Guardian and a Thief by Megha Majumdar. This book was really fantastic, and I thought the premise and how the author made you think was really fantastic. I'm going to try and do no spoilers when talking about all of these books, but I will warn you now, I don't know if that will always be possible, so I'm giving you a spoiler warning ahead of time. So this book is about two different families. One family, they're not extremely well off, but they are sort of in the middle upper class, and this book is meant to be set in the not too distant future in India, where, and if you didn't know, India is one of the countries that will face the most significant, not consequences, but as a result of climate change, they are one of the countries that will face most of the extreme weather or climate disasters. This book centers around that idea that it's just getting too hot for everyone to live there, so people are fleeing. This one sort of well-off family gets the opportunity to flee the country, and it's a contrast with another family, and another boy specifically, who is in the sort of lowest, poorest socioeconomic class. And it really is a sort of play on the title of who is a guardian and who is a thief, because both families and both characters do things that are both that a guardian would do and that a thief would do. And I thought that sort of play on morality was really, really fantastic. It really made you think, and it was really, really interesting. In one of the first classes I ever took for my university degree, they were speaking, or they said this quote, which is, "One man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter." And this book made me think about that quote and how true it is. That it really all just depends on your life situation, how you were brought up. And I don't think anything sort of highlights that as much as this book does. Really, really good. So that is the one book that was on my Kindle, so I can put that down. The next book I have to show you, I'm not too sure how long ago it was released, and I've read two other books by this author, and none of them really hit me as hard as this one did. That is Clara and the Sun by Kazuo Ishiguro. For me, this is the best book that I've read by him. I've also read, now I'm blanking, I've read Never Let Me Go, which I didn't really enjoy, and Nocturnes, which is a short story collection, but this one I thought was just fantastic. And it's unlike me to really like slow burn books, but even though this is quite slow paced, quite a slow burn, I thought the way that Ishiguro sort of handles the idea of artificial intelligence and robots and sentience was so like heartbreaking and heartwarming at the same time. So essentially this book is about a child who, they live in a society where it's pretty common for everyone to have an artificial friend, and it's told from the perspective of the artificial friend. You'll be unsurprised to know her name is Clara, and it starts out with her sort of sitting in the shop where she's sold, and she really develops this connection to this one girl who every day comes and looks at her in the window, and eventually she gets to go home with this girl, and it's about sort of, I guess, growing old and hope for humanity in a way that I wasn't expecting at all. Like, I was sobbing by the end of this, and I think the way that Ishiguro uses a sort of robot, something that we don't think of as sentient, to convey the preciousness of life was really, really impactful. It was not something I was expecting, that's what made it beautiful. I also think this is really stunning, this picture. Oh, here at the back here, there's like a list of all of Ishikaru's books. So I have read Clara in the Sun, Never Let Me Go, and Nocturnes. I'm not too sure, like, if I'm gonna read any more, because I do want to read The Remains of the Day, but I'm not sure about the other ones. But like most of his books, I think they've all got mixed reviews. I just really wasn't expecting such an introspectful, I don't know if that's a word, book from the perspective of a robot. Okay. The next book is a non-fiction, and I feel weird saying that it was one of my favorites because it's very heavy, but it's one that I felt like I couldn't leave out of this list because I don't think there has been a day since I've read it that I haven't thought about it, and it was very impactful and harrowing. That is The Eyes of Gaza by Celestia Alaquad. A diary of resilience. So this girl is Palestinian and she studied journalism just before 2023, and she returns home to Gaza, and this book sort of details, it's her diary essentially that she published from when the really severe bombing started and when she was lucky enough to escape. And just the things that this woman had to witness, and she's quite young, I think she was maybe 21 or 22 when this was published, or when she was writing the entries for this book. And every day, because she was press, she would wake up and put on her press helmet and have to go out, not knowing if at the end of the day she would come home alive or whether she would come home to a house and a family. And just, again, it feels weird to say that this is a favourite, but it really is such a raw account, and I think the author is so brave for being so open and vulnerable and publishing her diary with all of her inner inner thoughts. I certainly would never want to publish my own diary. I've tapped this one quite a bit because it was just full of so many quotes that I wanted to look back on and wanted to stick with me, and they definitely have. And it really just keeps things in perspective, I suppose. Like, I said this in I think I read this in January, and I said in my January reading wrap up that it really keeps things in perspective, you know, living in a house with more things that I could ever need in a safe country, and I'll probably never have to go through what Celestia went through. So it really is good to keep in your mind, I suppose, just how lucky we are in the West, especially in a country like Australia. Recommend reading this one, but just know that it is really, really heavy and upsetting. But I think we owe it to the Palestinians to not shy away from their stories when it gets hard, because they can't turn it off. We can turn off the news when it hurts our brain or our mental health is suffering, but I always come back to the idea that, you know, we just owe it to our fellow humans to help in any way we can if they're going through something horrible. The least we can do is pay attention and listen to their stories, even if it is hard. Like I said, they don't have a choice. They can't just turn off the news. They're living it every day. The next book is also a non-fiction, and if you watched my January reading wrap-up, you'll know that I listened to this book originally, but I liked it so much and I knew I wanted to read it again, so I picked up a physical copy, and that is Mother Mary Comes to Me by Arundhati Roy. So, I hadn't read anything by her. I know her book, The God of the Small Things, won the Booker Prize in 2014, I think. And she has another book that's escaping my mind right now. Maybe it'll be in here. The Ministry of Utmost Happiness is her other really popular book. So I picked this one up blind, not having read, and this is her memoir. And I expecting to be so blown away by it. It was so good. She's lived a seriously incredible life. Her mother was named Mary, and she ran a school in rural India, and it really specifically was about educating young women because, or girls I should say, because in India at the time that was really not a priority. So her mother was this really incredible feminist who also single-handedly brought a case all the way to like the Supreme Court or whatever in India, challenging the current laws about when like parents pass away. At the time, the estate would go only to a male son, and she challenged the law and made it so the female daughter could inherit part of the estate too. Like, it was shared 50-50. Previously it was not shared, it all went to the son. So this book sort of goes over how this incredible activist also was really, really abusive to Arundhati herself. And it sort of grapples with the idea that, you know, someone can be quite an incredible person but still be really horrible at the same time. Obviously, as well, it talks about Arundhati's life, and it's pretty incredible actually. She was originally an architect. She went to school for architecture, and then she didn't write The God of Small Things until she was in her 40s or 50s, I think. And she makes it very clear that, you know, just because everyone in Hollywood got famous at 20 years old doesn't mean that once you're in your 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s that you can't be successful. You actually can. She also talks about her activism, which she gets that bug from her mum. She's spoken a lot, and she's also written books on sort of socialism and moving towards a fairer society, and is very active in that space. But overall, this book was so good, and it's so strange because maybe 2 years ago I never used to read memoirs because all the ones I had read were so bad, and I just completely wrote off the genre. But in the past couple of years, some of my favourite books that I've read books to this day, but it's a memoir. And the next book I'm about to show you is also a memoir. So I've completely changed my tune on my thoughts on memoirs. I still think some are bad, but you just have to find the right people's memoirs to read. And speaking of good memoirs, this next book I also originally listened on audio, but I wanted to lend this out to family and friends and also read it again, and it's one of my favorite books now. It's called Fire Country. How Indigenous Fire Management could help save Australia. And this is by Victor Stevenson. He actually has a new book with more Indigenous knowledge coming out this year, which I'm very excited to get my hands on. So this is a memoir about Victor's life, but it mainly focuses on he is an Indigenous First Nations Australian, and if you didn't know, the Indigenous people of Australia had a really, really strong connection to country. They were managing the land here for over 60,000 years. And that's not an easy task. Australia is a massive country. It's just smaller than the US. Actually, I think it might be the same size. It has all different regions. We have tropics, desert, temperate rainforest. We have the largest temperate rainforest in the world down here in Victoria where I live. But, you know, the state of, as I said, the state of Victoria it's got both some desert and then temperate rainforest. It also has snowy mountains. The state of New South Wales has a massive, it's called the Great Dividing Range, and it divides pretty much the state in half, where the desert, there's the mountains, and then there's more temperate, and then up in Queensland it has the tropics, the rainforest, the Daintree, and then the other states pretty much are all just desert. And then Tasmania, which is the little island off the coast of Victoria, is pretty much all not rainforest, but it is rainforest. So there are so many different sort of ecosystems that are here, and they were managing those for 60,000 plus years, and they had very specific knowledge that was all passed down through talking, because they were an oral, and they are an oral community. They don't write things down. But after colonization, First Nations people were, enslaved and stripped away from the nature that they lived in, because they were semi-nomadic, and they weren't allowed, and still aren't allowed, to practice the sort of rituals is the wrong word, but they weren't allowed to practice their traditional knowledge with the land, and they're still not. And now we have really significant problems with bushfires because our First Nations people aren't allowed to go in and actually care for the land. So this book is about how it talks us through what the actual indigenous knowledge is and how that is used to care for the land and how that can prevent bushfires and how it can essentially recover the environmental damage that has been done to the land. It was honestly such a pleasure reading about all of the traditional knowledge and the connection to country, and it completely changed sort of my connection to the land as well. This is one of those books that I think genuinely every Australian should read, because it's not only important for the First Nations community, but it's so important for our environment to learn how we can look after it better. And there is so much traditional knowledge that is sort of tossed aside because it's not scientific, but the science matches, and the First Nations people knew what was good for the land because they lived with the land. There are photos in here too, which is really cool. These are some of the elders. Here is one of the fire stick ceremonies. And some more. These are also elders in Victor's community. And here is the author doing his own fire workshop. I don't remember what country Victor is from, but I know it was in Queensland. Let me see if it says. Basically, also if you didn't know, before the states of Australia and before Australia was Australia, First Nations people had their own countries. They're called countries. For example, the capital of Victoria is Melbourne, and Melbourne is on Wurundjeri country. I'm trying to think of another one. There's a whole bunch. There's Wathaurong. There's I can't think of any off the top of my head, but I think there was over like 600 countries or something like that, and everyone had a different language that they spoke, and unfortunately a lot of those languages are dying out now because God, there's so much horrific things that happened. But in the 1950s, 60s and 70s there was something called the Stolen Generation, which is basically when the Australian government I should clarify that this is the 1950s, 1960s and 1970s, so like in my parents' generation. The Australian government would take all Aboriginal children away from their families and put them in really horrendous foster homes, and essentially because community is such an important part of First Nations culture, they just completely tore that all apart, and there are still people who have no idea who their parents are because of the forced removal of children. And essentially the government believed that the First Nations people were savages and they couldn't care for their children, which is why they took them away. It's really horrible, horrible stuff. So if you're interested in the history of Australia, there's certainly a lot you can look into when it comes to First Nations people and how abysmally they were treated. The last book I have for you is a fiction, and this book just won the Women's Prize for Fiction, and I must say it is so well deserved because it was so good, and that is The Correspondent by Virginia Evans. This book was so good. I gave it to my mum to read and she also loved it. And this was so unique as well. I don't think I've ever read a book that was set out like this. But essentially, it tells the story of a lady, an older lady named Sybil, through letters and emails she writes. So for example, this is an email chain, but her main form of writing was letters. And she would write letters to her friends, and it would contain the replies back to her, and it was just such a heartwarming story. It was so good. I wasn't expecting, all the books I haven't expected this year, but I really wasn't expecting it to be so good, and I wasn't expecting to fall in love with the character. She's very old-timey, and you know old people, they have a gripe. They love to have a gripe and a complaint, and they don't understand the younger generations, but her commentary is so witty and she's genuinely hilarious. And I didn't expect myself to sort of get along with her character so well, and I just thought she was such a cool old lady. I thought the way that the story was told, it was so easy to read. I literally read it in a day. The way that sort of the letters are written, and the way that it's not like there are time jumps, because not all the letters, like, they arrive randomly, so you do get this really, like, the story jumps in time inconsistently, but I think that was done really well, and it made the story so much more engaging. I genuinely couldn't put it down. It was so good. Highly recommend this. I recommend all of the books that I've shown you today, but I just love The Correspondent. It was so good. Anyway, that is my list of my my favourite books that I've read this year so far. Let me know in the comments below what your favourite book you've read this year has been. And let me know your thoughts on any of the books that I've shared here today. But I would mainly just I'm really interested in what your favourite book this year has been. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe down below. I have so much going on in life at the moment that I do need to just scale back a little bit. So I am only going to be posting one video a week instead of the 2 that I was doing. I'm not too sure how long I'll keep just the one upload a week going for, but I do hope it's not too long. But just with my studies at the moment and everything, it's just quite a lot to keep on top of. And because even though the sort of course I'm doing is only a year, I do want to get the best grades I can because I want to do a master's after it. So I'm doing a graduate diploma at the moment, and yeah, I do want to do much more further study, so I'm just really focusing on putting all my energy into that at the moment. So I hope you can understand. But I'm hoping as well that just one upload a week will mean I can put more effort into the one video that I do upload instead of having to split it over 2. Anyway, thank you guys so much